Okay, here we are going to start with chapter 4. And this is getting started with PHP. So there's a lot of good information in here that's interesting to know and it's important for you to know. So I just want to go over a couple things from the chapter that I think bear repeating. And I just want you to be aware of the front end, the back end, and the full stack development, the overview of that. Just know that there's a front end, which is a client side, and the back end, which is a server side, which I know you've probably heard before. And then when you work across both, it's a full stack. So you could become a full stack developer. And so the front end development, it refers to everything users see and interact with in their web browsers. And the technologies we use for that are HTML, CSS, JavaScript. The things that we do are design layouts, build forms, create navigation menus, implement interactive features, and just make the website look pretty. And then the kind of focus that we have here is just optimizing the user experience, the accessibility, and responsiveness for a variety of devices. We learned about that last time with the media queries. And so then we have backend development. That's everything that's on the server. So that manages behind the scenes logic, the database interactions, and the server setup. And it's a hugely important job. And so the technologies that we use with this are PHP, Python, Node, Ruby, Java, .NET, all kinds of programming languages. So the responsibilities here include processing data, managing user authentication. And what's user authentication? Just ensuring that a person has the rights to access that database or that website. Implementing business logic. So that's the rules that we need to create our database by or create our interfaces with. So we are making sure that we meet the standards of the company for whom we're creating this database or this website. And then we need to understand how all the layers of the web application interact. So all these things together called the full stack. The layers within this full stack are the user interface, then the business logic, then the data modeling. And these are the steps in which we design this also. And so let's start again. User interface, business logic, data modeling, the APA or application programming interface, which connects the front end and the back end, facilitating this data exchange. And we have the server and the hosting, which is the infrastructure for running the applications, and then the testing framework, which a lot of times people don't pay enough attention to, but it's hugely important to ensure that everything works the way it's supposed to. So we run all kinds of different tests to make sure that the database is connected correctly and that programming language of the programs are running correctly. And so the full stack developer usually specializes in a subset of these technologies, but they have a broad understanding so they can build scalable, maintainable applications using all of these layers together. So then some other thing that I thought was pretty important, pretty interesting, were the different types of web pages. And so the dynamic web page is just a web page whose content is generated or changed in real time in reaction to a user interactions or data received from a server. And places we see these dynamic web pages are content management systems. And what's an example of that would be Press. It's kind of created for us. We have user dashboards and e-commerce sites. And, you know, lots of times now we have websites packages that we can just implement and use, that we don't have to design all this stuff anymore, right? But it's always good to know how to do all this. So if it doesn't work exactly like it's supposed to or how you want it to do work, you can fix it and upgrade it. So it's always important to know how everything works on the other side. And so we then have a single page applications, SPA talked about, and their web applications that load a single HTML page and dynamically update its content as the user interacts, rather than having to go back to the server and load new pages. And so this really relies on JavaScript frameworks like React, Angular, Vue, and we will be doing some React in this class. And actually, I probably should have done the React before I went into the PHP chapter. Sorry about that. And so the single page applications, there's the reduced server load and network traffic. So we have no bottlenecks, things load quicker, and smoother user interface. And it just makes them look better, a lot more responsive, the web apps. And so what are some examples of single page applications? Gmail, Twitter, Facebook, but those are all web apps. And then finally, we have web APIs. And those are application programming interfaces designed specifically for the web. So they allow different parts of an application, usually the front end and the back end, to communicate through structured protocols. And what's protocol? It's a set of rules of how something's going to operate. HTTP, that was an example of a great protocol. And so some of these protocols that we can use to communicate are like REST or GraphQL. And so it just enables the front end to send requests to the back end for data or services without reloading the page. And then also brings in all kinds of data from different sites that we can use in our web page. Okay, so all these things are central to modern web application, so we can get better, more interactive, and scalable user experiences. So then we're moving on to a programming language called PHP. And it started out as being called Personal Homepage Tools in 1994, but now it's grown into being called PHP Hypertext Protocol, Preprocessor, with support for databases and other features. And it's so funny. Unfortunately, I was programming in 1994, and even back then we said PHP is not going to last. We're not going to be using this for long. Just like we said about JavaScript. Well, here we are. What year is this? 2025, and we're still using them. And you can see on this chart right here from W3 Techs, and this is a 2024 survey, 76.5% of databases use PHP. So I don't think it's going anywhere. And this is in regards to server-side technologies. Remember, the back end. Okay, so anyhow, PHP is open source server-side scripting language for web development. It's mainly used to generate dynamic web content, interact with databases, process user input, and once again, manage authentication. And so how it's used is embedded in the HTML. And then when that HTML calls it or executes it, or it is then used in the program. So it's pretty easy to learn. It's pretty straightforward, but it does have classes and it does have constructors, it does have variables. So it is a full-blown programming language, which we'll see in just a moment, but it's pretty easy to learn, integrate smoothly with the databases, especially MySQL, because that's what it's kind of created with when we talk about that layer, LAMP, Linux, Apache Server, MySQL, and PHP. And we're going to see that when you load your XAMPP software that I have, I believe, in this chapter. And so then also PHP powers things like WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. Okay. Anything else I wanted to talk about in regards to this? No, those are just some interesting things that they're talking about in this chapter. It also talked a lot about web hosting and how you get web hosting and what's a better way to do it. And so we aren't actually going to get a web host. We're not going to actually get a URL or name for ourselves or a domain name for ourselves in this class, but it's something that you can do. If we had the 14 weeks, I think we'd have more time to set those things up. But since we don't, we are just going to use XAMPP on our computer, and that's going to simulate going to a server and coming back to the front end. Okay, so I think the easiest way to talk about programming or to learn a programming language is looking at the code. I always reverse engineer things so I can figure out how they work. Being able to read code is really a huge skill. Even if you can't write it, as long as you know what it's doing, that helps a lot. But I know you can write it. So anyway, here we go. We're going to look at these PHP. So you notice that the PHP language, of course, ends in a .php. Makes sense, doesn't it? So we know then referring to programming language. So anyhow, in your book, we want to go to lab 4.14, lab reports, weather reports, PHP. Now, I don't know, but when I opened it to start to look at it, the answer, it was already set up with the correct answers with all the code that I needed. I don't know if that has happened to you guys, but in any case, we're going to go over it. And it asks us to do a few things. To call, let's see here, what did it ask us to do? Yes, to call the temp to condition and condition to range functions. So we're supposed to complete both of those. We want to do some testing and return a string saying what the current weather condition is. And then we're going to do a condition to range to say what the current temperature range is. But when I opened my code, all that stuff was already coded for me. So in any case, I don't know if it is for you or not. So we're going to look at it, and I'll leave it there on the screen for you so you can use that code for your assignment. So first of all, the index.php, we have 3 files here. We have the style CSS, which we're not going to look at, just know it's there for us. We have our index.php. Now, weather report functions.php. So our index PHP is what's going to call the functions of our PHP. So embedded here inside of our HTML is our PHP, which then is going to call functions from the weather reports function. So what we have to do to include this PHP is we're going to open it with a less than sign, question mark PHP, and close it with just a question mark greater than sign. So I usually put both of those on my page and just start typing. But this page, index.php, is just a read only. So we don't need to change anything here. It has everything we need to get this program running. And so here we have a require. You have to have this to be able to use your PHP because this is importing that weather report function here into this part of our program. So we can actually call it. It's just 2 classes that are working together. So we put a require. If it doesn't find the file, it's going to error out and just stop the program. We use an include and it doesn't find the file. It still goes on to the rest of the program and uses it and just skips over that portion, which probably isn't a good thing. If you need to do some kind of calculation or get some answers, that would be kind of very good for the user. So we want to think about all those things. And that, again, is why testing is so hugely important when you're writing your code. I remember I had a years ago when I first started, I had well, I was in the Air Force then when I first became a programmer. And I had a colonel who was a fantastic programmer. And he always told me, Judy, whenever you're writing code, think of like not the smartest person that you can think of who might be using a computer, and write that code for them. Think of everything wrong that they could possibly do. And so my person, I always thought it was my mom because she's pretty much of a Luddite. She decided to even quit being a school principal because they brought computers into the school. So I thought she'd be the one that I need to think about when I'm writing this code. So in any case, here we have the PHP requiring our PHP file, which is here, and that's where we're supposed to be creating our functions. And so what's happening is we're just going to set a variable to 41, and then it's just going to print to the screen because we're within this HTML. The current temperature is whatever stored in this variable, degrees Fahrenheit, which of course would be 41. And then it's going to print to the screen with the echo. It is. And so what's it going to do here is going to call temp to condition variable temp. And so this then is going to go and go to this program because that's been imported and use the functions here. So this function, temp to condition, is going to send that value. And that value we saw was 41. So we have ternary operator here. So what's going to happen? We're going to return whichever one proves true. So it's first going to say, is it less than 32? Then it's going to be freezing. Or is it less than 56? And so when we do just the less than, right, we know everything, if it's not less than 32, it's going to be everything past 32, right? So then we're going to look at anything from 32 up to 55. And when we're doing this condition. So if that's true, it will print cool and it will leave this function and go back to the program. Now, I think because it was 41, that would be where it would prove true and print cool to our screen. Otherwise, it would go look at this, less than 80. And so if less than 80, would print warm, and otherwise anything else, this will be like another or, it'll print hot. So anything above 80 is going to say hot. Now we'll go down again, and it's going to look at a new temperature, same steps. It's going to print a different outcome. But now we're going to go down here and we're going to look at condition. And this is going to call another function. Condition equals freezing. So the current condition is freezing. And so we're going to call count condition to range in the weather report function. And so depending on which value, we're going to use this match method that's included in PHP. And it's going to check that condition. And so whichever one matches whatever we sent, it's going to print this to our screen. And then it will go back, and that will be the end of the program. So really the code that they wanted us to create, are these two functions. Function temp to condition temp. We have opening and closing parenthesis. And inside this, we're going to return whichever one proves true. So yes, it's warm, or remember, that's our final outcome. That is like the catch-all here using this hot. So anything that is over 80 is going to be hot. And then we'll look further, and we have our function condition to range. And this is, we're sending a word. We're sending a string, aren't we? It's going to match that string. And then whatever it matches is going to put this string, return that string, and print it to our screen. And finally, it's always good to have a default. If none of these conditions match, you want to have something printed to the screen that says, I couldn't find anything else, so this has to be it. So that's a good way to clean up your code. So that is what we're supposed to be writing. And as I said previously, mine was already written, so I don't know about you guys, but you can stop here and write your code. Okay, so this next one, 4.16, is a little more in depth than 4.14. This actually uses classes and constructs and properties. And so it's a little more in depth. So it's a good one for us to go over. So once again, this is the HTML, and this is where the function calls are at. We're going to have what we're going to be sending to the orchard group PHP, and then have return to print to our screen. And we will run this after we're finished. Let's go back over here. Let's go over here, and actually go ahead and on your computer, open up the instructions for this. You know, these right here. So you're seeing the things that we need to do. So the first thing it asks us to do is define 3 properties for the orchard group class. So I have my class. And what do we have within a class? We have constructors, we have properties, we have methods that we create. They're all defined here. And so this makes the object of this orchard group class that we then is called from index. So here we have class orchard group, and here are our properties, and they're private, so they're just going to be used within this program, within this one object that we're creating here. And it wants us to create group size, apple type, and pounds picked. So here we have these because they're going to store information. Information is going to be put into those variables. So here we have a function construct. So this is how we create an object of orchard group. We use this constructor to do that for us. And so we have to have the properties included in here so this will work. So we can create this object. And so these names don't have to be the same names as the variables. It's better not to have them as the same name so it doesn't get confusing. But we are going to assign these to these properties when we create an object of orchard group. And so this is a default that we have set up here. So if we ever call it and don't send any information, the default values will be size 2, the type will be golden delicious, and the number picked will be 10. Otherwise, when we call it, we send it some values, then that will overwrite these default values here. And so whatever comes in here, these will then be assigned to the variables of this object that we just picked, depending which group we're talking about. And let's look over here just a moment. So here, the first one, for instance, we would start with is going to call a new orchard group. And you see here when it calls this new orchard, there's not sending any information to it, is it? It's empty because we're using those default values. Those are what's going to be sent when we call orchard group. So whatever the default values were will be 2, golden delicious, and picked. And 10, excuse me, would be that output for this one. And so we send this back, we return this, and it's going to be in this output, in this HTML code, in this format. So that's how it will appear on the screen. And this, of course, means the object that we're working with right now. So this one that we just created, that we just called, is Wilson. So that group info will come back using those default values. And so then whatever they were, those will print to the screen for the group info. But then we're going to go further. And what else do we need to do? So we've created our properties, we created our constructor, and then we want to complete the group info. So you do need to complete this. And it shows us here what needs to be included in this on our right here. But it is a little different. It can't just look like that. So let's go back here to our code. So this is what we want to do with the group size, which I just talked about. So size, this referring to the object we're creating right now. So the first one will be Wilson. And so we'll put group size because the values that came in or were already here, already as a default, are going to be assigned to these properties. And that's going to be the properties of each object that we create. So the first one we're going to create is this Wilson's. And it's going to have the 2, the golden delicious, and the 10. Okay, so anyway, we're talking here about the group info. So we create this, and this is what I need for y'all to put here. So this is when we call this function group info from our index PHP. This is what's going to be returned to us. and these will be included in this output. So then we'll go back over here, and that's just going to do it for this line. So next, we need to do the price per pound function. What are we calling a price per pound here? Well, let me look here. I'm sorry. All right, so this table is where we do our calculation. That's what we're going to use for the calculation. So evidently, we're going to have to figure out what the apple type is and then multiply it by the price per pound. So then we can call our total cost. Okay, so let's look first for the price per pound. And we're going to do that over here. And so we'll use a switch statement. And so we're going to have our function price per pound. Then let's say switch this, because this is the object we're working on at this point. So we're going to do 3 of these. There are 3 different apple groups. So each time it's going to apply to what apple group we're using. And so we see that our apple type. So if it's Golden Delicious, it's going to be $2.95. Granny Smith, $3.15. Honey Crisp, 3.25. And default return a -1 because not any of those were correct. And it's a way to end this function cleanly. Okay, so when we do this, what has started this price per pound is when we call the total cost. So there's our price per pound. And so it wants us to complete the total cost function. That's the last thing we need to do for this. Come on. Apply the pounds picked by the price per pound. And then if it's greater than or equal to 4, discount the cost by 20%. Okay. Then our price per pound. Now our total cost. Multiply the pounds picked by the price per pound. So our cost is going to equal this, because this is telling us, and you know what? I take it back. Yes, we do need to use the dollar this here so it knows which one we're working with. And so we're going to use pounds picked, and then times the price per pound. And then if the group size is less than 4, it's going to be just that cost. Else, it's going to be the cost times 0.8, because, you know, that's opposite of 0.20, which is 20%. So by 8 will give us 80%, which is what would be the cost if we're getting 20% taken off. That makes sense. So 2 functions that we've created, a line of code that we created for output using all the constructor, everything we sent in through the constructor. And so this constructor, when we call this, when we start this program, it's going to call this and create each object for us. And so we'll look here. We see that we not just have Wilson, but we have Macintosh and Barnhouse. And so we have those default values, but this time we're going to replace each of the default values in constructor. It calls this, assigns those are then assigned these variables, and then they are used in the rest of the program. And so we'll do those calculations, and those will be printed out to the screen just like the Wilson was. So I'm going to run it, and then I'm going to put the code on the screen for you to look at to see if that helps. So let's see how it runs. See if it runs. Probably should have tried that first. Thing is fast. Yay! So there it is. There's our output. It prints just exactly what we wanted it to say, what we wanted it to print. So we can see here, group size, this just printed out just what we wanted. So we have the apple, the size, the apple type, and the pounds picked, 10, and it gives us our picking price, picking costs after we do those calculations. Whoops. And that's returned when we're figuring out our total cost. It's going to say apple picking costs, and then that's going to return the total cost when it's called from here in each little object. So I'm just going to refer to each of these as objects that we've created because we've used properties, we've used some methods or functions that we've created. And those were all defined by the orchard group PHP. And that's a great use of classes. And so you can see our output. You can see how they interact between the HTML and the PHP. So let me get out of this. And go back here. Come back. Okay, good. So stop your camera. Stop your tape. Look at this code. Use that. And then remember, we have some more. We have to do our total cost calculation also. Let me know if this doesn't work for you. So here, stop, look at that. Then I'll go down here and we'll do that. Okay, hopefully that's good for you. And I think PHP is pretty fun and it's pretty easy to write. So hopefully this reinforces some of the other programming that you've learned already. Thank you.